It was a cold, rainy night when Megan Taylor, a 12-year-old girl with tear-streaked cheeks, sat shivering on a lonely bench in a deserted park. Her clothes were soaked, her stomach growling from hunger, and her eyes darted nervously with each sound that pierced the stillness of the night. She had run away from yet another foster home, unable to endure the cruelty that seemed to follow her from one place to another. The bruises on her arms were fresh reminders of why she could never go back. As she huddled under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, she noticed a woman walking briskly down the path, her heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement. The woman, dressed in a sleek black coat with an umbrella held tightly above her head, seemed out of place in this desolate park. Her presence was both alarming and intriguing to Megan, who instinctively shrank into the shadows, hoping to remain unnoticed. But the woman's sharp eyes caught sight of the small figure curled up on the bench. Pausing mid-stride, she lowered her umbrella slightly and peered through the darkness, her gaze softening as she took in the sight of the scared, shivering girl. The woman's name was Olivia Whitmore, a renowned philanthropist known for her work with disadvantaged children, though she never expected to encounter one in such a dire situation tonight. Without hesitation, Olivia approached the bench, her voice gentle but firm. "Hey there, are you all right?" she asked, though it was clear from the girl's state that she was anything but. Megan flinched at the sound of the stranger's voice, her heart racing as she considered bolting into the night. But something in the woman's tone kept her rooted to the spot. "I'm not going to hurt you," Olivia continued, sensing the girl's fear. She crouched down to eye level, offering a warm, reassuring smile. "My name's Olivia. What's yours?" Megan's eyes flickered with uncertainty, her fingers digging into the damp fabric of her jacket. After a moment's hesitation, she whispered, "Megan." "Nice to meet you, Megan," Olivia said softly, trying to ease the tension. "It's cold out here, and you look like you could use something warm to eat. How about we go somewhere safe and we can talk?" The offer hung in the air, and Megan's mind whirled with doubt and desperation. She had learned the hard way not to trust easily, but the hunger gnawing at her stomach and the chill seeping into her bones made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, this woman could be different. After what felt like an eternity, Megan gave a small, hesitant nod. Olivia's smile widened in relief. "All right, let's get you out of this rain," she said, gently guiding Megan under the shelter of her umbrella. As they walked together through the empty park, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. Little did she know, the woman walking beside her carried secrets of her own, secrets that would intertwine their fates in ways neither of them could foresee. And as they disappeared into the night, the first steps of a harrowing journey had just begun. The ride to Olivia's house was silent, save for the occasional hum of the car engine and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. Megan sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her small hands gripping the seatbelt as she stared out into the darkness. Olivia glanced over at her from time to time, her heart aching for the girl who seemed so lost and afraid. "Are you okay with chicken soup?" Olivia asked gently, breaking the silence. "It's warm and filling. I'll make a pretty good one." Megan nodded almost imperceptibly, her gaze never leaving the rain-slicked streets. Olivia didn't push for more, sensing that Megan needed time to feel safe before opening up. She focused on the road ahead, her thoughts swirling with a mix of concern and determination. Whoever this child was, she needed help, and Olivia was determined to provide it. The house they arrived at was large but not ostentatious, nestled in a quiet neighborhood that contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside Megan's mind. Olivia parked in the driveway and turned off the engine. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "This is my home, Megan. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Megan's eyes widened slightly as she took in the sight of the house. It was the kind of place she had only seen in movies. Warm light spilling from the windows, a welcoming front porch, and a sense of security that felt foreign to her. But as much as it intrigued her, it also filled her with a deep sense of unease. Places like this didn't exist in her world, and trusting that it could be real was terrifying. Olivia noticed the girl's hesitation and smiled reassuringly. "Let's get you inside, out of these wet clothes. We'll get you something warm to eat, and then you can rest." They stepped out of the car, and Olivia led Megan up the front steps and into the house. The warmth hit Megan immediately, enveloping her in a comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Olivia hung up her coat and umbrella, then turned to Megan with a soft expression. "Come on, let's get you dried off." She guided Megan to the bathroom, handing her a fluffy towel. "You can take a hot shower if you want. I'll leave some clothes outside the door for you." Megan hesitated, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. But the idea of being clean and warm was too tempting to resist. She nodded, and Olivia left her alone, closing the door gently behind her. As the sound of running water filled the small bathroom, Megan peeled off her soaked clothes and stepped under the stream of hot water. It felt like heaven on her chilled skin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax, if only a little. The water washed away the grime, but it couldn't erase the bruises or the deep-seated fear that clung to her like a second skin. After her shower, she found the clothes Olivia had left, soft pajamas that smelled faintly of lavender. They were a little big on her, but they were clean and warm, and that was all that mattered. She dressed quickly and stepped out of the bathroom, the scent of chicken soup wafting through the air, guiding her to the kitchen. Olivia was at the stove, ladling the soup into bowls when she saw Megan enter. She smiled warmly. "Perfect timing. Come sit, and let's get some food in you." Megan slid into a chair at the kitchen table, her eyes wary but her stomach eager. Olivia placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of her, along with a plate of buttered bread. "Eat as much as you want," she said, sitting down across from Megan with her own bowl. Megan picked up the spoon and dipped it into the soup, bringing it to her lips. The warmth spread through her, and for a moment, the world felt a little less cold. She took another spoonful and another until the bowl was nearly empty. Olivia watched her with quiet relief, glad to see the girl eating, even if she remained silent. After they finished eating, Olivia leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. "Megan, I want you to know that you're safe here. Whatever happened before, it's in the past. No one will hurt you here." Megan's eyes flicked up to meet Olivia's, filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. She wanted to believe those words more than anything, but the scars on her heart ran deep, and trust was not something she gave easily. "I know it's hard," Olivia continued, her voice gentle. "But if you ever want to talk, I'm here to listen. You don't have to say anything now. Just know that you're not alone." Megan nodded, though she didn't speak. She wasn't ready to tell her story. Not yet. But something in Olivia's eyes made her think that maybe, one day, she could. And for now, that was enough. "Let's get you settled for the night," Olivia said, standing up and offering Megan a hand. Megan hesitated, then took it, feeling the warmth of Olivia's palm in her own cold hand. Olivia led her to a cozy guest room with a soft bed, fresh sheets, and a nightstand with a small lamp casting a warm glow. "This will be your room," Olivia said softly. "You can stay here as long as you need. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Megan nodded, her throat tight with emotion. As Olivia turned to leave, Megan found her voice, though it was barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Olivia paused, turning back with a soft smile. "You're welcome, Megan. Good night." As the door closed, Megan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the room that was now hers. For the first time in a long while, she felt something other than fear. She felt the faint stirrings of hope. And as she curled up under the covers, her eyes growing heavy, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But deep down, she knew the shadows of her past weren't far behind, and sooner or later, they would catch up to her. And when they did, she feared what they might bring. Megan awoke with a start, her heart pounding in the darkness. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The unfamiliar softness of the bed beneath her and the warm blankets tangled around her legs felt alien. Then, the events of the previous night came rushing back. She was in Olivia's house, safe for now, but the nightmares that haunted her sleep were never far behind. She sat up, pushing the covers away, and looked around the room. The dim light of early morning filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Everything was quiet, almost too quiet, and it made her uneasy. The silence felt like the calm before a storm. Megan slipped out of bed, her feet sinking into the plush carpet as she made her way to the window. She pulled the curtain back slightly and peeked outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside looking fresh and washed clean. But the dark clouds lingering on the horizon hinted at more to come. A soft knock on the door made her jump. She turned quickly, her heart racing again. But it was only Olivia standing in the doorway, her smile gentle. "Good morning, Megan," Olivia said softly, not stepping inside but waiting for Megan to invite her in. "Did you sleep all right?" Megan hesitated, then nodded. She didn't want to admit that she hadn't slept much at all, that the nightmares had kept her tossing and turning. But something in Olivia's kind eyes made her feel like she didn't have to hide it. Olivia nodded, as if understanding without needing words. "I'm making breakfast. You must be hungry." Megan's stomach growled at the mention of food, betraying her before she could answer. Olivia chuckled softly. "Come on, I've got pancakes and bacon on the stove. We can eat, and then maybe you can tell me what you'd like to do today." Megan followed Olivia to the kitchen, the smell of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filling the air. The kitchen was bright and warm, with sunlight streaming through the windows, making it feel like the safest place in the world. Olivia gestured for Megan to sit at the table, then brought over a plate stacked with pancakes, golden and fluffy, with butter melting on top and a side of crispy bacon. "Help yourself," Olivia said, setting the plate in front of her. "There's syrup on the table, too." Megan hesitated only for a moment before reaching for the syrup, pouring it over her pancakes in a slow, steady stream. She picked up her fork, glancing at Olivia, who was busying herself at the stove with her own plate. It felt strange to eat in such a peaceful setting, with no one yelling, no threats hanging in the air. For once, she could eat without fear, and that small comfort was something she hadn't realized she'd been missing so much. As they ate, Olivia kept the conversation light, asking Megan if she liked pancakes, what her favorite food was, and if there were any activities she enjoyed. Megan answered in short sentences, still guarded, but Olivia's warmth was slowly chipping away at the wall she had built around herself. After breakfast, Olivia suggested they go for a walk if the weather held up. Megan agreed, though the idea of leaving the safety of the house made her anxious. But Olivia seemed so confident, so sure that everything would be all right, that Megan found herself nodding before she could think of a reason to say no. They stepped outside, the air cool and crisp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sounds being the distant chirping of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves as a breeze passed through. Olivia led them down the sidewalk, keeping her pace slow and steady so Megan could walk beside her comfortably. As they walked, Megan found herself glancing at Olivia from time to time, wondering what kind of person she really was. It was hard to believe that someone like Olivia, with her calm demeanor and gentle smile, could understand what Megan had been through. But there was something in the way Olivia spoke to her, the way she listened without pressuring Megan to share more than she was ready to, that made Megan think that maybe, just maybe, Olivia knew more about pain and loss than she let on. They reached a small park at the end of the street, where a playground stood empty and inviting. Olivia paused, looking down at Megan with a smile. "Do you want to sit for a while?" she asked, gesturing to a nearby bench. Megan nodded, and they sat together, the quiet stretching between them like a comforting blanket. Megan stared at the swings, swaying gently in the breeze. Memories of the last time she had been at a playground surfacing unbidden. It had been so long ago, before her life had turned into a series of foster homes and broken promises. The thought made her chest tighten with a mix of sorrow and anger. "Do you want to talk about it?" Olivia's voice broke through Megan's thoughts, gentle but not intrusive. She was looking at Megan with those same kind eyes, full of understanding. Megan's first instinct was to shake her head, to bury the memories deep down where they couldn't hurt her anymore. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Olivia had been patient with her, not pushing, just offering a listening ear. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, Megan felt like someone genuinely cared. "I used to go to the park with my mom," Megan said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before everything." Olivia nodded, her expression softening with empathy. That must have been a special time for you. Megan shrugged, not sure how to respond. It had been special, but it also felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else entirely. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. She's gone now, Megan added, her voice trembling slightly. She died when I was little. I'm so sorry, Megan, Olivia said softly, her heart breaking for the girl beside her. She wanted to reach out, to offer some form of comfort, but she knew that Megan needed to open up on her own terms. Megan nodded, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. She had cried enough over the years, and tears hadn't brought her mother back. But talking about it, even just a little, made her feel lighter, as if a tiny part of the weight she carried had been lifted. They sat in silence for a while longer, the sounds of the park around them filling the space between words. Megan found herself feeling something she hadn't expected: peace. It wasn't complete, and it wasn't strong, but it was there, a small ember in the darkness that had surrounded her for so long. When Olivia finally suggested they head back to the house, Megan felt a pang of reluctance to leave the bench. But she knew that no matter how peaceful this moment felt, she couldn't stay in the past forever. She stood up, wiping at her eyes quickly before Olivia could see, and followed her back toward the house. As they walked, Olivia glanced down at Megan, sensing the shift in her mood. Thank you for sharing that with me, Olivia said gently. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to, but I'm here whenever you need to talk. Megan nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. And that, she realized, was the first step toward healing. Back at the house, Olivia busied herself with small tasks, giving Megan space to process her thoughts. Megan wandered through the living room, her fingers grazing the spines of books on the shelf, the smooth wood of the coffee table, the plush fabric of the couch. Everything here was so different from the world she had known, so safe, so warm, so full of possibilities. She paused in front of a framed photograph on a side table. It was of a younger Olivia, smiling brightly with a man and a little boy beside her. The boy was grinning, his arms wrapped around Olivia's waist, while the man had his hand on her shoulder, his expression full of pride. Megan stared at the picture, a pang of sadness hitting her. It was clear Olivia had a family, one that looked happy and whole, unlike anything Megan had ever known. She wondered what had happened to them, why the house was so quiet now. Olivia's voice brought her out of her thoughts. That's my son, James, and my husband, Michael, she said softly, coming to stand beside Megan. Her smile was wistful as she looked at the photo. James was about your age when that was taken. Megan looked up at Olivia, searching her face for answers. Where are they now? Olivia's smile faltered for a moment, and Megan saw a flash of pain in her eyes. Michael passed away a few years ago, she said quietly. And James, he's grown up now, living on his own. The weight of Olivia's words settled between them, and Megan suddenly understood that Olivia carried her own share of loss and heartache. It made her feel a little less alone, knowing that even someone as strong as Olivia had faced difficult times. I'm sorry, Megan whispered, not sure what else to say. Olivia shook her head, her smile returning, though it was tinged with sadness. Life is full of ups and downs, Megan. We all go through hard times, but it's how we choose to move forward that matters. Megan nodded, absorbing Olivia's words. She still had a long way to go, and there were many things she wasn't ready to face. But knowing that Olivia had faced her own struggles and come out the other side gave her a small glimmer of hope. Would you like to watch a movie? Olivia offered, sensing that Megan needed a distraction. Megan nodded again, grateful for the offer. They settled on the couch, choosing a lighthearted film that didn't require much thinking. As the movie played, Megan found herself relaxing, the tension in her body slowly easing as she allowed herself to enjoy the simple pleasure of being in the moment. By the time the credits rolled, Megan was feeling more at ease than she had in a long time. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for now, she was content to stay here, in this warm house, with Olivia's quiet presence beside her. For the first time in years, Megan dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But deep down, she knew the shadows of her past were still lurking, and one day, she would have to face them. And when that day came, she hoped she would be strong enough to fight back. Days passed, and Megan gradually settled into a routine at Olivia's house. Each morning began with a quiet breakfast, followed by short walks or simple activities that Olivia suggested to keep Megan's mind occupied. The unease that had clung to Megan when she first arrived began to fade, replaced by a tentative sense of safety that she hadn't felt in a long time. Still, the shadows of her past lingered at the edges of her thoughts, never fully retreating. One afternoon, Olivia decided to introduce Megan to her work. "I thought you might like to see what I do," Olivia said with a gentle smile as they sat together in the living room. "I run a foundation that helps children who've had a tough start in life. We offer counseling, education, and sometimes just a safe place to stay, like here." Megan looked up from the book she was pretending to read. Her curiosity piqued. "You help kids like me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Olivia nodded. "Yes, kids who've been through difficult situations, who need someone to care, to listen, and to help them find their way again. It's important to me because, well, I know what it's like to feel lost." Megan studied Olivia's face, searching for signs of the struggle she mentioned. She had always seen Olivia as strong and composed, someone who had her life together in a way Megan could barely comprehend. But now, hearing Olivia speak about her work, Megan wondered if there was more to her story, something deeper that connected her to the children she helped. "Did something happen to you?" Megan asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia's expression softened, and she set aside the papers she had been holding. "Yes, a long time ago," she began, choosing her words carefully. "I went through something very difficult when I was younger. I lost people I loved, and for a while, I didn't know how to move forward. But I found a way, with the help of others, and that's why I want to help kids like you, to make sure you don't have to go through it alone." Megan's heart ached at the thought of Olivia going through something similar to what she had endured. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of concern and fear, afraid of what she might hear. Olivia hesitated for a moment, then nodded, as if making a decision. "My parents died when I was a teenager," she said quietly. "It was a car accident. They were there one moment and then gone. I had to grow up fast after that, take care of myself, and figure out how to keep going." Megan felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling with empathy. "Thank you," Olivia replied, her smile tinged with sadness. "It was hard, and I struggled for a long time. But I had people who cared about me, who helped me find my way. And now I try to do the same for others." Megan nodded slowly, understanding more about Olivia than she ever had before. The woman who had taken her in wasn't just someone with a big heart. She was someone who had survived her own battles and come out stronger on the other side. "Can I help you?" Megan asked suddenly, surprising even herself with the offer. "With your foundation, I mean, maybe I could do something, anything." Olivia's eyes lit up with warmth and pride. "I'd love that, Megan," she said, reaching out to gently squeeze the girl's hand. "There's always something you can do to help, even if it's just being there to listen to others, like I'm here to listen to you." Megan felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. For so long, she had been focused on her own pain, her own fears, that she hadn't considered that she might have something to offer in return. Maybe, just maybe, she could be more than the scared girl she saw in the mirror every day. That evening, Olivia took Megan to visit the foundation's main office. The building was a modest but welcoming space, filled with colorful murals and art created by the children who had passed through its doors. Megan walked through the halls, taking in the laughter and chatter of kids her own age, some younger, some older. It was a place full of life and hope, where the darkness she had known seemed a little further away. As they entered Olivia's office, Megan noticed a large bulletin board filled with photos and drawings. She approached it slowly, her eyes scanning the smiling faces, some familiar, others new. "These are some of the kids we've helped over the years," Olivia explained, coming up beside her. "Each one has their own story, their own struggles, but they're all finding their way, just like you." Megan stared at the board, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of her was happy to see so many kids smiling, thriving, despite whatever they had gone through. But another part of her couldn't help but wonder if she could ever be like them, if she could ever find that kind of peace. Do they ever forget? Megan asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. About the bad things that happened to them? Olivia shook her head gently. No, not completely. We don't forget, but we learn to live with it. We find ways to heal, to move forward. It takes time, and it's not always easy, but it's possible. Megan nodded, taking in Olivia's words. She knew that forgetting wasn't an option, that the memories of her past would always be with her. But maybe with time, she could learn to live with them. Maybe even find a way to turn her pain into something good like Olivia had. As they left the foundation and headed back home, Megan felt a shift within herself. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there, a tiny flicker of determination that she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was beginning to believe that she might have a future worth fighting for. Back at the house, as the evening drew to a close, Megan found herself standing by the window in her room, looking out at the darkening sky. She had learned so much in such a short time, about Olivia, about herself, and about the possibilities that lay ahead. She wasn't ready to face everything, not yet, but she was starting to see that she didn't have to do it alone. And with Olivia by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could find the strength to heal and to help others heal too. As she climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, Megan let out a long, slow breath. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew that. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid to take the first step. And as she drifted off to sleep, the shadows of her past seemed just a little less daunting. The following morning, Megan awoke to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. The soft, rhythmic noise was soothing, a gentle reminder that she was safe inside. She stretched beneath the warm covers, feeling a rare sense of calm that she wasn't used to. For the first time in a long while, the day ahead didn't seem so daunting. After breakfast, Olivia suggested they spend the day indoors, given the steady rain. How about we do something creative? Olivia asked with a smile. I have some art supplies in the study. We could paint, draw, or even try some crafts. Megan hesitated, unsure. She hadn't done anything artistic in years, not since before her mother died. But the idea of spending the day doing something simple and calming was appealing. She nodded slowly, and Olivia's smile widened. They made their way to the study, a cozy room filled with bookshelves and a large wooden desk that had seen better days. Olivia pulled out a box of art supplies from one of the shelves, placing it on the desk and opening it to reveal paints, brushes, colored pencils, and various other materials. Take whatever you like, Olivia said, stepping back to give Megan space. There's no right or wrong here. Just have fun. Megan approached the box cautiously, her fingers brushing over the supplies. She picked up a paintbrush, feeling its weight in her hand, then selected a small canvas from the box. It had been so long since she'd done anything like this, and a part of her worried that she wouldn't remember how. But Olivia's encouraging presence made her feel like it was okay to try. They worked in comfortable silence, Olivia occasionally glancing over at Megan to make sure she was all right. Megan dipped the brush into the paint, choosing colors that spoke to her. A deep blue for the background, streaked with hints of gray and purple. As she worked, her mind began to quiet, the anxiety that had become her constant companion easing with each stroke of the brush. After a while, Olivia paused to admire Megan's work. That's beautiful, Megan, she said softly, her voice full of genuine admiration. It's very peaceful. Megan glanced up at Olivia, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Thanks, she murmured, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. Olivia returned to her own project, a simple watercolor of a landscape, while Megan continued to paint. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, creating a serene backdrop to their quiet creativity. It was a small moment, but for Megan, it felt significant, like a tiny step toward reclaiming a part of herself that she had thought was lost forever. As the hours passed, Megan became more absorbed in her painting, adding details and layers to the image taking shape on the canvas. She didn't think about the past, about the pain and fear that had haunted her for so long. Instead, she focused on the colors, the textures, the way the brush felt in her hand. It was a rare escape from the weight of her memories, and she savored it. When they finally finished, Olivia suggested they take a break and have some tea. "We can hang your painting up in the living room if you'd like," Olivia offered, her tone casual but warm. "It would look lovely there." Megan blushed slightly at the compliment. "Maybe," she said, her voice shy but pleased. They moved to the kitchen, where Olivia set the kettle to boil and prepared cups for tea. As they waited, Megan found herself glancing around the room, feeling a sense of comfort and belonging that she hadn't expected. This house, with its warmth and welcoming atmosphere, was starting to feel like a refuge, a place where she could be herself without fear. Olivia noticed Megan's contemplative expression and smiled gently. "You know, Megan, you're doing really well. It takes a lot of courage to start over, and I can see how strong you are." Megan looked down at her hands, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "I don't feel strong," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel scared all the time." "That's okay," Olivia said softly. "Being strong doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going, even when you are, and that's exactly what you're doing." Megan nodded, absorbing Olivia's words. She didn't know if she believed them entirely, but it was comforting to hear. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but maybe, just maybe, she could learn to live with it, maybe even overcome it one day. After tea, Olivia suggested they watch another movie, something lighthearted to keep the mood relaxed. Megan agreed, grateful for the distraction. As they settled on the couch, wrapped in soft blankets, Megan allowed herself to relax fully, sinking into the comfort of the moment. Halfway through the movie, however, the doorbell rang, startling Megan out of her peaceful state. She tensed instinctively, her heart leaping into her throat. Olivia noticed and placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's okay, Megan. I'll go see who it is," Olivia said calmly, getting up from the couch. Megan nodded, her anxiety spiking as she watched Olivia walk toward the door. She strained to hear the conversation, her mind racing with possibilities. What if it was someone from her past, someone who had come to take her away? The thought sent a wave of panic through her, and she clutched the blanket tighter around herself. Olivia's voice drifted back to her, calm and composed, but Megan couldn't make out the words. After a few moments, Olivia returned to the living room, her expression neutral but slightly concerned. "That was just a delivery," Olivia said, trying to sound casual as she held up a small package. "Nothing to worry about." Megan exhaled slowly, relief flooding through her. She felt foolish for having panicked, but Olivia's understanding smile made her feel a little better. "Why don't we finish the movie?" Olivia suggested, sitting back down beside Megan. "It's just getting to the good part." Megan nodded, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. She tried to focus on the movie, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the doorbell, to the possibility that someone might come looking for her. She knew it was unlikely, but the fear was always there, lurking in the back of her mind. As the credits rolled, Olivia turned to Megan, her expression gentle but serious. "Megan, I want you to know that you're safe here. No one is going to take you away, not unless you want to leave. This is your home for as long as you need it to be." Megan met Olivia's gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and lingering fear. What if someone finds me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Olivia shook her head firmly. "No one will find you here, Megan. I promise. And if they do, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." Megan nodded, trying to take comfort in Olivia's words. She wanted to believe them, but the shadows of her past were stubborn, refusing to let her fully embrace the safety and warmth that Olivia offered. As they prepared for bed that night, Megan couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. The day had started out so peaceful, so full of hope, but now, as she lay in the darkened room, the old fears crept back in. She stared up at the ceiling, listening to the rain that had started again, tapping against the window in a relentless rhythm. Her mind wandered to places she didn't want to go, memories she had tried to push away, but that always found a way to return. Megan pulled the covers tighter around herself, closing her eyes and willing the thoughts to stop. But the fear was like a living thing, coiling in her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wasn't ready to face the darkness alone. Not yet. But maybe, with Olivia's help, she could find a way to keep the shadows at bay, at least for a little while longer. And as she finally drifted off to sleep, the rain continued to fall, a steady reminder that the world outside was still there, waiting for her to find the strength to face it once more. Enjoying the video? Subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting content. Click the subscribe button and stay updated with the latest news. The next morning, Megan woke to the sound of soft voices drifting through the house. She sat up in bed, blinking in the pale light of dawn that filtered through the curtains. For a moment, she simply listened, trying to make out who was speaking. It was Olivia, her voice calm and measured, but there was someone else too, a voice that was unfamiliar. Curiosity got the better of her, and Megan slipped out of bed, padding quietly across the room to crack open the door. She peeked out into the hallway, her heart thudding in her chest. The voices were coming from the living room, and as she strained to hear, she caught snippets of the conversation. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice," Olivia was saying. "She's been through a lot, and I want to make sure she has all the support she needs." "It's no trouble at all," the other voice replied, warm and understanding. "I'm here to help in any way I can." Megan's stomach twisted with anxiety. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but the fear of the unknown kept her rooted in place. Who was this person? What did they want with her? Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Just as she was about to retreat back into her room, Olivia's voice called out, gentle but firm. "Megan? It's okay. You can come out." Megan froze, caught in the act, and then slowly pushed the door open wider. She stepped into the hallway, her heart pounding, and made her way toward the living room. When she entered, she saw Olivia sitting on the couch, a kind smile on her face. Beside her was a woman in her late 30s, dressed in professional yet casual clothing, with a soft expression that immediately put Megan on edge. "Megan, this is Dr. Sarah Collins," Olivia said, her tone reassuring. "She's a therapist who works with children, and I thought it might be helpful for you to talk to her, but only if you're comfortable with it." Megan's stomach churned at the word therapist. She had seen a few over the years, none of whom had been able to help her in the way she needed. They had asked her questions she didn't want to answer, pushed her to open up before she was ready, and in the end, she had only felt more isolated. Dr. Collins seemed to sense Megan's apprehension. "It's nice to meet you, Megan," she said softly, her voice gentle and inviting. "I'm here to help, but we can go at your pace. There's no rush and no pressure." Megan glanced at Olivia, searching her face for any sign of insistence. But Olivia simply nodded encouragingly, letting Megan know that the choice was entirely hers. For a long moment, Megan hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She didn't want to talk about the things that haunted her, didn't want to relive the nightmares that had shaped her life. But at the same time, a small part of her yearned for someone to understand, someone who might be able to help her make sense of it all. "Okay," Megan finally whispered, her voice shaky but resolute. "I'll try." Olivia's smile widened, and Dr. Collins gave a nod of approval. "That's very brave of you, Megan," she said. "We can start whenever you're ready. We don't have to dive into anything heavy right away. We can just talk, get to know each other a little." Megan nodded, though her anxiety still gnawed at her. She followed Dr. Collins to the study, where they sat in two comfortable chairs facing each other. Olivia stayed behind in the living room, giving them privacy but remaining close in case Megan needed her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Megan fidgeted with the hem of her shirt, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding Dr. Collins' gaze. The silence felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on her chest, but Dr. Collins didn't push or pry. She simply waited, her expression patient and kind. Finally, Megan mustered the courage to speak. "I've seen therapists before," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It never helped." Dr. Collins nodded, her tone understanding. "I'm sorry that it wasn't helpful for you, Megan. Therapy can be tough, especially when you don't feel like you're being heard or understood. But I want you to know that I'm here to listen, and we can take things as slowly as you need." Megan looked up at Dr. Collins, searching her face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was a gentle compassion that made her want to trust the woman in front of her, even if just a little. Do I have to talk about everything? Megan asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the memories she had buried deep inside. Only if you want it, Dr. Collins replied softly. We can talk about anything you like. What you enjoy doing, how you're feeling today, or even just what's been on your mind lately. This is your time, and we'll go wherever you're comfortable. Megan nodded, though the fear still lingered at the edges of her thoughts. I don't know where to start, she admitted, feeling small and uncertain. That's okay, Dr. Collins said, her tone warm and reassuring. We don't have to start anywhere specific. Sometimes just talking about the little things can help us understand the bigger things. Megan took a deep breath, trying to steady the nerves that danced in her stomach. I've been having nightmares, she said slowly, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. About the places I've been, the people I've lived with. Dr. Collins nodded, her expression serious but calm. That must be really hard, Megan. Nightmares can make it feel like you're reliving those moments all over again. Megan swallowed hard, the memories flashing behind her eyes. I can't stop them, she whispered, her voice cracking with the weight of her fear. No matter how hard I try, they just keep coming back. I'm sorry you've been dealing with that, Megan, Dr. Collins said gently. It's not your fault, and it's not something you have to handle on your own. There are ways we can work on making those nightmares less powerful, less overwhelming. Megan looked up at Dr. Collins, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and skepticism. How? She asked, her voice laced with desperation. Dr. Collins leaned forward slightly, her tone soothing. There are different techniques we can try. Things like grounding exercises to help bring you back to the present moment, or imagery techniques to help change the outcome of the nightmare. But we'll go at your pace, and you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. Megan nodded slowly, her mind processing the possibilities. It was hard to believe that anything could take away the terror that gripped her in the dead of night, but the idea that she didn't have to face it alone brought a small measure of comfort. For the next hour, they talked about Megan's nightmares, her fears, and even the small moments of peace she had found since staying with Olivia. Dr. Collins listened without judgment, offering gentle suggestions and validating Megan's feelings in a way that felt different from the therapist she had seen before. By the time the session ended, Megan felt drained, but also lighter, as if she had set down a small part of the heavy load she had been carrying for so long. Dr. Collins smiled warmly as they stood up to leave the study. You did great today, Megan, Dr. Collins said, her voice full of encouragement. You're very brave for facing these things, and I'm here to help you every step of the way. Megan nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Thank you, she murmured, her voice soft but sincere. As they stepped back into the living room, Olivia looked up from where she had been reading on the couch. Her eyes met Megan's, filled with quiet pride and support. How do you feel? Olivia asked gently, her tone full of genuine concern. Megan considered the question for a moment, then gave a small, tentative smile. I feel a little better, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Olivia's smile widened, and she stood up to give Megan a reassuring hug. I'm so proud of you, Megan, she said softly, her voice full of warmth. You're stronger than you know. Megan leaned into the embrace, feeling a sense of safety that was still new but undeniably real. The road ahead was still long, and the shadows of her past were far from vanquished. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't facing them alone. As Dr. Collins said her goodbyes and left the house, Megan found herself feeling a strange mixture of hope and fear. She didn't know what the future held, but she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. That night, as she lay in bed, the rain once again tapping softly against the window, Megan felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. It wasn't strong, and it wasn't constant, but it was there, a small light in the darkness that had consumed her for so long. And as she drifted off to sleep, the nightmares that had plagued her every night didn't seem quite as powerful. She still feared what they might bring, but for the first time, she believed that she might have the strength to face them, and that made all the difference. The following days passed in a blur of small, quiet moments that began to stitch together a new sense of normalcy for Megan. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world outside glistening under the soft light of early spring. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers, and Megan found herself drawn to the garden behind Olivia's house, a place she had scarcely noticed before. One morning, after breakfast, Olivia suggested they spend some time outside. "It's such a beautiful day," she said, her eyes bright with the warmth of the sun streaming through the kitchen windows. "Why don't we do some gardening? I could use some help with the flowers." Megan hesitated, her fork hovering over the last bite of her toast. Gardening wasn't something she had ever done, but the idea of spending time in the sun, away from the confines of the house, appealed to her. She nodded slowly, and Olivia's smile widened. They changed into old clothes and headed out to the garden, where Olivia handed Megan a small trowel. "You can start over there," Olivia said, pointing to a patch of soil where the flowers were just beginning to bud. "We'll clear out the weeds and make sure the soil is nice and loose for them to grow." Megan knelt in the dirt, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingers. It was strange, yet oddly satisfying, to dig into the soil, to feel the connection between her hands and the earth. The world around her felt peaceful, the sounds of birds chirping in the trees and the distant hum of bees adding to the serene atmosphere. Olivia worked beside her, occasionally offering tips or pointing out different plants. Megan found herself relaxing into the task, her mind focused on the simple, repetitive motions of digging, pulling, and planting. There was something meditative about it, something that allowed her to forget, at least for a little while, the turmoil that usually occupied her thoughts. As they worked, Olivia began to speak, her voice calm and steady. "I used to garden with my grandmother," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "She taught me everything I know about plants and flowers. It was our special time together, just the two of us." Megan glanced at Olivia, intrigued. "What was she like?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Olivia paused, her gaze softening with fond memories. "She was a strong woman, kind but firm. She believed in hard work and always found a way to see the beauty in the world, even when things were tough. I admired her so much." Megan nodded, her hands still working the soil as she listened. "She sounds like she was amazing," she murmured, feeling a pang of longing for the connection Olivia described. It made her think of her own mother, the memories of their time together growing dimmer with each passing day. Olivia agreed, her tone wistful. "She taught me that no matter how difficult life gets, there's always something worth nurturing, something that can grow if you give it the right care." Megan absorbed Olivia's words, feeling their weight settle into her heart. She wondered if the same could be true for her, if she could find a way to grow beyond the pain that had shaped her life for so long. It was a daunting thought, but as she looked at the small buds beginning to bloom under her care, a tiny spark of hope flickered within her. They worked in silence for a while longer, the sun climbing higher in the sky, warming their backs as they tended to the garden. Megan found herself losing track of time, her mind slipping into a peaceful rhythm as the hours passed. Eventually, Olivia stood up, stretching her arms over her head with a satisfied sigh. "I think we've done a pretty good job here," she said, surveying the garden with pride. "How about we take a break and have some lemonade?" Megan nodded, wiping the dirt from her hands as she rose to her feet. Her muscles ached pleasantly from the work, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of accomplishment, small as it might be. They moved to the porch, where Olivia poured them both glasses of lemonade. Megan took a sip, savoring the tart sweetness as she sat down on the porch steps, the glass cool in her hands. "Thank you for helping me today," Olivia said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "It's nice to have company in the garden." Megan smiled faintly, the warmth of Olivia's words seeping into her. "I liked it," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "It felt good." Olivia nodded, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "I'm glad to hear that, Megan. Sometimes the simplest things can bring us the most peace." Megan looked out at the garden, where the flowers they had tended were now standing tall and proud, their petals unfurling in the sunlight. It was a small thing, but it filled her with a sense of calm that she hadn't known she needed. As they sat together on the porch, sipping their lemonade in companionable silence, Megan allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that the future might hold more days like this. Days of quiet peace and small joys, where the shadows of her past seemed a little less threatening. And as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden, Megan felt something shift within her. A slow but steady acceptance that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to bloom too. A week had passed since Megan's first session with Dr. Collins, and though the nightmares still haunted her sleep, there was a subtle change in the way she faced each new day. It wasn't that the fear had disappeared. It was more that she had begun to find small ways to manage it, to keep it at bay long enough to catch her breath. Olivia had noticed the shift, the way Megan moved through the house with a little less trepidation, and she couldn't have been more proud. One afternoon, Olivia suggested they take a trip into town. "We can visit the bookstore," she said, her eyes twinkling with the suggestion. "Maybe pick out a few new books for you to read." "How does that sound?" Megan hesitated, the idea of leaving the safety of the house making her stomach tighten with anxiety. But she had grown tired of the same four walls, and the thought of exploring something new, especially a bookstore, a place she had always loved, was tempting. "Okay," Megan agreed softly, her voice wavering with uncertainty. Olivia smiled, giving her a reassuring nod. They set off in Olivia's car, the drive into town filled with the soft hum of the radio playing in the background. Megan stared out the window, watching the scenery blur past, her nerves slowly settling into a quiet anticipation. She hadn't been to town since she'd come to live with Olivia, and the idea of being among strangers again was both thrilling and terrifying. When they arrived, Olivia parked the car on a quiet side street, close to the small, independently owned bookstore she loved. The shop was quaint, with a brick facade and large windows displaying carefully curated selections of books. A bell chimed softly as they entered, the scent of paper and ink wrapping around Megan like a comforting blanket. Inside, the shop was warm and inviting, with shelves that reached to the ceiling and narrow aisles that begged to be explored. Megan felt a small flutter of excitement in her chest, the sight of so many books igniting a spark of curiosity that she hadn't felt in a long time. "Take your time," Olivia said, her voice gentle as she placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. "There's no rush. I'll be over in the nonfiction section if you need me." Megan nodded, her gaze already drifting toward the fiction shelves. She wandered slowly down the aisles, her fingers trailing along the spines of the books, reading the titles and feeling the familiar comfort of being surrounded by stories. There was something magical about a bookstore, a place where she could escape into the pages of a book and forget the world for a while. She stopped in front of a shelf dedicated to young adult fiction, her eyes scanning the titles until one caught her attention. A book with a dark, moody cover and a title that hinted at mystery and adventure. Megan pulled it from the shelf, flipping it over to read the back. The synopsis intrigued her, and she tucked the book under her arm, determined to add it to her growing stack. As she moved through the aisles, Megan began to lose herself in the possibilities each book offered. For a little while, she forgot about the anxiety that had gripped her earlier, forgot about the nightmares that waited for her at night. Here, in this quiet space, surrounded by stories and words, she felt a sense of peace that had become increasingly rare. By the time she reached the front of the store, Megan had gathered a small stack of books in her arms. Olivia was waiting for her by the checkout counter, a couple of books in her own hands. She smiled warmly when she saw Megan's selection. "Looks like you found some good ones," Olivia said, her voice full of approval. "Are you ready to check out?" Megan nodded, feeling a small sense of accomplishment as she placed her books on the counter. The cashier, an older woman with kind eyes, rang up the purchases, making small talk with Olivia as she did. Megan listened quietly, feeling a bit like an outsider looking in, but also comforted by the normalcy of the exchange. As they left the store, bags in hand, Olivia suggested they stop by a nearby cafe for a treat. "They make the best hot chocolate in town," Olivia said, her tone light and encouraging. "What do you think?" Megan hesitated, but the thought of a warm, sweet drink was too tempting to resist. She nodded, and they walked a few doors down to the cafe, a cozy little spot with comfortable chairs and a warm atmosphere. They found a table by the window, and Olivia ordered for them both hot chocolate with whipped cream and a plate of freshly baked cookies to share. Megan wrapped her hands around the mug, savoring the warmth that seeped into her cold fingers. The first sip was heavenly, the rich chocolatey sweetness melting away the last of her lingering anxiety. As they sat together, enjoying their drinks, Olivia began to talk about the books she had picked out, sharing snippets of the stories with Megan. Megan listened, feeling a sense of connection in the shared love of reading. It was in these small, quiet moments that she felt the safest, the closest to something resembling normal life. But as the conversation flowed, a shadow of doubt crept into Megan's mind. The peacefulness of the moment felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any second. She couldn't help but wonder when the other shoe would drop, when the shadows of her past would come rushing back to remind her that this kind of happiness was not meant for her. Olivia seemed to sense Megan's shift in mood. She reached across the table, gently placing her hand over Megan's. "Whatever you're feeling, it's okay," Olivia said softly. "You don't have to carry it alone. We'll face it together, one step at a time." Megan looked down at Olivia's hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe those words. Maybe she didn't have to do this alone. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her to find some peace, to create a life that wasn't defined by fear. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave, Megan felt a small, tentative sense of hope take root within her. It was fragile like a newly planted seed, but it was there, and that was enough for now. And as they walked out of the cafe, the sun shining down on them, Megan held on to that hope, determined to see where it might lead. The next few days were quiet, the kind of quiet that Megan had begun to appreciate. Olivia kept their activities low-key, sensing that Megan needed time to adjust to the idea of moving forward. They read together in the evenings, sometimes talking about the books they'd picked up from the store, and other times simply sitting in companionable silence. It was during one of these peaceful moments that the letter arrived. The mail had been light that day, just a few bills and a catalog, but at the bottom of the stack was an envelope with no return address. Olivia picked it up with a slight frown, her fingers tracing the edges of the envelope as she turned it over in her hands. Megan noticed the change in Olivia's demeanor and looked up from her book. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Olivia hesitated, then shook her head, offering a reassuring smile. "Probably nothing important," she said, but there was something in her tone that made Megan uneasy. Olivia set the other mail aside and opened the envelope carefully. As she pulled out the letter inside, her eyes scanned the contents, her expression slowly shifting from curiosity to something much darker, something that made Megan's heart start to race. "What is it?" Megan asked again, this time more urgently. Olivia didn't answer right away. She finished reading the letter, her face pale and tense, before finally folding it back up and setting it down on the table. She looked at Megan, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "Megan, there's something I need to tell you," Olivia began, her voice gentle but firm. "I didn't want to bring this up until I knew more, but it seems that someone has been asking questions about you." Megan felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Her stomach clenched, and her hands went cold as a familiar sense of dread crept over her. "Oh," she whispered, barely able to get the word out. "A man came by the foundation last week," Olivia explained, choosing her words carefully. "He claimed to be from the state, asking about any new children in our care. I told him I couldn't give out that information without the proper documentation, and he left. But now this letter, it doesn't feel right." Megan's mind raced, memories of past encounters with men like that flooding back. Social workers, foster care agents, even police officers. People who had the power to uproot her life with a few signatures on a piece of paper. She had thought she was safe with Olivia, that this time might be different, but now the old fears were crashing back in, suffocating her. "What does the letter say?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. Olivia hesitated, then picked up the letter and read it aloud, her voice calm and steady despite the tension in the room. "It's vague," she said, "but the gist is that this person is still looking for information. They want to know where you are, and they're implying that they'll keep searching until they find out." Megan's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard threats like this before, but they had always been followed by someone showing up at her door, ready to take her away from whatever small semblance of stability she had managed to find. The thought of it happening again, of losing Olivia and this fragile new life she had started to build, was too much to bear. "What do we do?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was fighting to keep the panic at bay, but it was a losing battle. The room felt too small, the walls closing in on her as her worst fears began to take shape. Olivia reached across the table, taking Megan's hands in hers. "We don't panic," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto Megan's. "I'm going to handle this. I have contacts who can help us figure out who this person is and what they want. But I need you to trust me, okay? We're not going to let them take you away. Not without a fight." Megan swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to believe Olivia, to trust in her strength and the promise she was making. But the fear was so strong, so overwhelming, that it was hard to see past it. "I don't want to go back," Megan whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't go back." Olivia squeezed her hands, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're not going anywhere, Megan," she said, her voice resolute. "We're going to get through this together, just like we've gotten through everything else. I promise you that." Megan nodded, though the tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by her own fear, but Olivia's presence, her unwavering support, helped to steady her. "We'll take it one step at a time," Olivia continued, her tone softening as she saw the fear in Megan's eyes. "First, I'll reach out to my contacts and see what we can find out. Then we'll decide our next move. But no matter what, I want you to know that you're safe here with me." Megan nodded again, her breathing slowly returning to normal as she clung to Olivia's words. It was hard to believe that this nightmare could have a different ending, that she might actually be able to stay in one place, to build a life without the constant fear of being torn away. But Olivia had never let her down before, and as Megan looked into her eyes, she saw the strength and determination that had carried them both this far. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. "Okay," Megan whispered, her voice trembling but full of resolve. "We'll figure it out." Olivia smiled, though the worry still lingered in her eyes. "That's my girl," she said softly, releasing Megan's hands and reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "We'll figure it out together." And as they sat there, the letter still lying on the table between them like a dark cloud over their heads, Megan felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. It was fragile, easily extinguished, but it was there, and it was enough to keep her going. For now, that would have to be enough. The days following the arrival of the letter were tense, filled with an undercurrent of unease that neither Megan nor Olivia could shake. Olivia had been true to her word, contacting her network of friends and colleagues to try and trace the origin of the letter, but the answers were slow in coming. Each day that passed without news felt like another step closer to the looming threat that hung over them both. Megan tried to keep herself busy, throwing herself into reading, gardening, and even helping Olivia with small tasks around the house. But no matter how hard she tried to distract herself, the fear gnawed at her, an ever-present reminder that the fragile peace she had found could be shattered at any moment. One evening, after another long day of waiting and worrying, Olivia sat down with Megan at the kitchen table. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Olivia looked more tired than Megan had ever seen her, the weight of the situation clearly taking its toll. "Megan," Olivia began, her voice steady but tinged with weariness, "I've heard back from a few people, and it seems that whoever sent that letter is being very careful. They're using false names, untraceable addresses. It's clear they don't want to be found." Megan's heart sank. She had hoped for more concrete answers, something that would give them a sense of control over the situation. But instead, it felt like they were being drawn deeper into a web of uncertainty, with no clear way out. "What does that mean?" Megan asked, her voice small and frightened. Olivia sighed, reaching across the table to take Megan's hand. "It means we have to be extra careful," she said gently. "I've spoken to a lawyer who specializes in cases like this, and she's advised us to stay vigilant, to document everything, and to be ready to act if necessary. Megan nodded, though the words did little to ease the tightness in her chest. The thought of having to act made her stomach churn with anxiety. She didn't want to think about what that might entail, whether it meant going into hiding, leaving behind the life she had started to build with Olivia, or something even worse. Seeing the fear in Megan's eyes, Olivia squeezed her hand, her expression softening. "I know this is scary," she said quietly, "but we're not helpless. We have options, and we'll face this together, just like we've faced everything else. I won't let anyone take you away, Megan. Not without a fight." Megan looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of Olivia's touch grounding her in the midst of her swirling emotions. She wanted to believe that they could handle this, that they could outmaneuver whoever was threatening her newfound sense of safety. But the fear was so strong, so overwhelming, that it was hard to see past it. "What if they find me?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of her fears. Olivia's eyes softened further, and she leaned in closer, her voice firm and reassuring. "If they do, we'll deal with it together. I have people I can call, places we can go if we need to, but I'm not going to let that happen, Megan. Not if I can help it." Megan nodded, though her heart still pounded with anxiety. The idea of having to run again, to leave behind the small sense of stability she had found, filled her with dread. She had spent so long running, always looking over her shoulder, that the thought of doing it again felt like a nightmare she couldn't escape. As if sensing her thoughts, Olivia gave her hand another squeeze. "Megan, I need you to trust me," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I've dealt with difficult situations before, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. But I need you to be strong, to keep doing what you've been doing, taking things one day at a time." Megan swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She wanted to be strong, to believe that they could face whatever was coming, but the fear was so overwhelming, so suffocating, that it felt impossible. But as she looked into Olivia's eyes, saw the unwavering resolve there, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could do this. Maybe, together, they could find a way to protect what they had built. "I'll try," Megan whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'll try to be strong." Olivia smiled, a small but genuine smile that lit up her tired face. "That's all I ask," she said softly. "We'll get through this, Megan. I promise you that." The days that followed were filled with a cautious sense of waiting. Olivia continued to gather information, to prepare for any eventuality, while Megan tried to keep herself busy, to keep the fear at bay. They took walks in the garden, spent quiet evenings reading together, and even ventured into town once or twice, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But the threat of the unknown loomed over them like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything they did. Megan found herself jumping at small noises, constantly looking over her shoulder, half expecting someone to appear at the door and drag her away. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Megan turned to Olivia, her voice small but determined. "What if we can't stop them?" she asked, the fear she had been trying to keep at bay bubbling to the surface. Olivia didn't answer right away. She watched the sun dip below the trees, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, before finally turning to Megan. "If that happens," she said quietly, "then we'll do whatever we have to do. But I want you to remember something, Megan. You're not alone in this. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. And that's something no one can take away from us." Megan nodded, the words sinking in, bringing with them a small measure of comfort. She wasn't alone. She had Olivia, and together, they would find a way to navigate whatever lay ahead. As the last light of day faded into the night, Megan leaned against Olivia, feeling the warmth of her presence, the steady beat of her heart. The fear was still there, lurking at the edges of her thoughts, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it had been. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this. And as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Megan held on to that hope, determined to see where it might lead them. We hope you were moved and inspired by our story. We want to hear your opinion. Leave a comment below, share your impressions, and your own stories of resilience and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next emotional videos. Join us on this journey and follow more incredible stories. See you next time.